would tell myself to not pay attention to everybody else and to pay attention to myself. I think that's what they tell runners. Don't look around. Just worry about your own pace. Writing, my book came out when I was ready to have my own voice.
Well, hello and welcome back to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Melanie Anagnos. And, I was thinking about this interview that I recorded with Melanie, and one of the things that she said really stuck with me from our conversation, and that was her advice to her younger self. My final question typically on the show is, if you can go back in time, right, to do a little Marty McFly, and whisper some words of advice to your younger self, what would you say? And Melanie, her words were really interesting. She said, don't look around, just run your own race. And we were talking about writing, but as a runner, that really resonated with me. And I've been a runner since high school, but I didn't really start running really long distances. And by that, I mean, half marathons or more. Until my mid-40s. And that was during the COVID lockdowns because honestly, there wasn't as much to do and I needed to get outside of my house. So I started running, really long distances. And I trained for my first half marathon back then. And at that race, my performance was okay. It was just okay. I ran a decent pace, certainly wasn't breaking any land speed records or winning any awards after crossing the finish line. But, still I did cross that finish line and I got a sense of accomplishment from that experience. Then I really did get bit by the long distance racing bug. I love a good 5K, but they're over fast, half marathon, there's a longer playlist that goes along with that. And honestly, as I'm thinking about it, that first half marathon really felt a lot like writing my first novel. Was that first novel great? No, it wasn't. But it was good enough. It was good enough that people encouraged me to keep going and to write more. And that encouragement mattered. It mattered to me. Just like cheers on the race course or camaraderie after crossing the finish line. The writing community and the running community are very similar. They're both full of very supportive people who will cheer you on. Even though you're competing with each other in some way, there's a lot of support there. And here's the thing, with both racing and writing, putting in the work makes all the difference. Training, showing up, logging the miles, or in the case of writing, it's putting words on the page, revising, rewriting. That's what gets you across the finish line. The distances are the same, whether it's 13.1 miles or 80,000 words. Over time, though, that effort does get easier. When you learn your pace, you build endurance, and particularly when you stop worrying about what everybody else is doing and just finding joy in the process itself. Let's face it, if you don't find joy in running, you're never going to be able to put in the time to build your endurance to run long distances. And if you don't enjoy the process of writing, you're never really going to put anything authentic on the page to write that book. So just a little parallel there between two of my worlds. And, I think that's what Melanie has done. She's found her own pace, she's found her own voice, and she's running her own race as a writer. So why don't we hear it from Melanie? Let's uncork Melanie's story. Melanie Anagnos is a crime novelist who was born in Paterson, New Jersey, which is also the backdrop of her police procedurals. She's been a waitress, an attorney, and a stay-at-home mom to her now 2 adult children. She received her MFA from Sarah Lawrence College and joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss her latest novel, Night Swimming. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Melanie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here, Melanie. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
There's a couple of points I could go to, but I think I'll start with more recently when I went to get my MFA. And after that, when I really started submitting stories to literary journals and began working on novels. I think we could start there.
Sure.
Night Swimming began I'd say about 2.5 years ago when I did my first drafts and connected with the publisher who did, produced the story, the novel for me.
Yeah. What encouraged you to start that writing program at Sarah Lawrence? I've had the good pleasure of interviewing so many graduates of that program, and I'm curious what drove you to that particular program.
I had been involved with. They have a connected program, the Writing Institute. So I'd been taking some classes there, and then a friend of mine said, "Hey, let's get our MFAs." And it was really that simple.
Simple. Did you have a sense, like when you were growing up or even into your adulthood, that this is something that you might potentially do someday, write a book?
I think it was always in the back of my mind. I think when I thought of writing when I was younger, the idea was, oh, maybe I'll be a journalist. But for whatever reason, I didn't pursue that. I went for my law degree, and I did a much different kind of writing then. But creative writing was something I was always interested in. And after my son was born, and I was then a stay-at-home mom, I had more time, and I started doing short stories, really, and really growing as a writer, taking courses, understanding craft.
Yeah. I've interviewed so many authors on this program who, were first attorneys, and they left the law behind them at some point in time. Whether it's starting a family or just a career pivot, and some writing careers really took off where they didn't have to do the lawyer thing anymore, the attorney thing anymore. What area of law did you practice?
I started off when I was in New Jersey doing, commercial work. And then I worked in Manhattan. I worked for the Commodities Exchange.
Okay. Got it.
And that was very interesting.
Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine. Well, what can you share with us about Night Swimming? I have to say that it is the title of one of my favorite REM songs.
I will say that was an inspiration when I was thinking of titles that came to me. And people have said to me, you spelt it incorrectly. It's 2 words. And I said, no, it's 1. So thank you for validating that.
Yeah, of course.
What can I tell you? I think the inspiration for that was to write a book that I wanted to read. And I really like police procedurals. And I like the simplicity of the kind of crime fiction that was going on in the 1970s, and I wanted to just write something the kind of story that I'm drawn to.
Well, what can you share with us about the story of Night Swimming?
The story itself. Well, that's so hard because I don't want to give away any spoilers.
Of course.
I really struggle with that. It's when I do a reading and always doing the first chapter because you can't really go much further. It's really the story. Well, I'm very much a storyteller. So when I'm writing genre, my obligation is to tell a good story. So it's a crime, it's crime fiction. It's about a double homicide and a young police officer who's really given his first case, or it's not his, he's not assigned to it, but he's part of it, and how his investigation gets him further and further to, closer to identifying the killer, and the tables turn. So that is the bare bones description of the story. But I think it's layered. Mm-hmm. There are. I'm always drawn to the 1970s and the social disruptions of the 1970s, and because this took place in Patterson and the Hurricane Carter case had been really litigated in the 1970s, and there was enormous distrust for the police department in Patterson. I don't delve into that because that's not my story, but it's certainly a part of the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we don't want to give too much away about the plot, but I'm curious, what do you think draws you to the 70s, especially 70s crime fiction? Because I have a point of view on it myself, but I'm curious as to what draws you to that time period.
Well, I'm drawn to the time period because I think it was really very pivotal. People think of the 1960s as the great change in American society, but I think that took place very much in the 1970s. You had you still had civil rights, and then you had gay rights and second wave feminism. So you had so much going on, and there was also economic dislocation in the 1970s, and I think there was a lot of change. And I think when we talk about men and women, and I write a lot about gender roles, and that was really where you saw this real examination of that. And I know now there's a discussion, I don't want to get too off topic, about men and how men are being marginalized, and that really has its roots in the 1970s. So that that interests me, the kind of social upheaval, the kind of equilibrium we're always trying to find as a society.
Yeah, I mean, you had the 50s with this post World War II, boom, move to the suburbs, and then with the 60s, introducing a lot of political unrest, a lot of social unrest, which really, you're right. I mean, continues through the 70s. And of course, you still have Vietnam happening in the 70s, and what happens in this really mistrust in government that we really didn't have, World War II era. But you really do have a big mistrust in government, and things, come to a head.
Well, yeah, think of Dirty Harry, who was this anti-hero, and he was a police officer, but that was the kind of view of society that was going on.
Yeah, my father took me and my twin brother to every Dirty Harry movie that came out, and we were way too young to be seeing most of them.
I think if you look at them now, you would be surprised.
Yeah, no, looking through it now, because the culture has changed so much, and what you're allowed to see on the screen has the envelopes have been pushed, but still it's gritty. It's gritty.
Yes,
but I still have a sort of a soft spot in my heart for those movies.
Oh, I actually I read a Substack, and I'd written recently on Dirty Harry, and that I think he was mislabeled as a misogynist, which I don't think that he was.
Yeah.
I think like Clint Eastwood, his character was a little bit more complex than we give him credit for.
Yeah, no, Clint is he's still directing, right? I mean, he's in his 90s. Is he still directing?
It's astounding. That's the kind of creative longevity we all want.
Yeah, his storytelling is it's fantastic, and he's a composer too. That's the other thing that one of those random facts that I learned about him not so long ago is he composed like the music to Mystic River. I believe he composed it.
I knew he was very very drawn to jazz. I didn't know that he actually composed, but that would sound about right.
Yeah, as we're talking about the 70s and police procedurals, I have to admit that I watched a Columbo last night that I had never seen before.
Oh, my husband and I have been binge watching Columbo, and then we just pivoted to Kojak.
Kojak is delicious as well. It's got a different sort of flavor. But we have a network here. What's it called? Oh my gosh, it's all those like high number cable channels, but they play Columbo, they play Quincy, they've got Kojak. But I find myself like finding comfort in some of those older TV shows because they had a style. And Columbo, if there's a Columbo I haven't seen, I'm always surprised because I think I've seen all of them at least twice. But do you have a favorite Columbo? Is there a Columbo that comes to mind that you like?
There is, and I can't. It was the one at the winery, and I can't recall.
Oh, Donald Pleasance.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that was a great one. And I love all the ones with Jack Cassidy because he's a wonderful villain.
Oh, he's great, and the other great villain is Robert Culp, who was in 4 or 5.
Yes, he was in I think at one that I'm thinking of, but yeah, he was a lot of fun. And I have to say, I came across this a description in one of the crime magazines, and it was called Throwback Thriller. So that's not my term, but it was really about. I think this idea that they're not simplistic, but they're slow moving, they're pacing in a much different way. And I going back to what I write, I think I'm really attracted to that. It doesn't have the same movement, that, some, like these, breakneck speed thrillers do, but it does have movement, and there's a lot of engagement with the character that really, drives the tension. So, and I think that that's why I watch those shows, because I find that, very interesting.
Well, that
very compelling to me.
And they also don't rely on violence. They don't necessarily rely on dirty language, or obscenity, I guess is probably a better term. I think they had a little bit more style to it, and maybe the stories were a little bit simpler in some ways, but they were just fun. It was always fun to watch him unravel and get into somebody's head a little bit, and it was just I don't know. Was it, I sound like an old man now, but it was a different time. It was a different.
Oh yeah, very much. But I think they're very much enjoyed now, and I think it's and it's a style of writing. That's what I love, the genre. You could have cozy mysteries. You can have, again, thrillers of wide variety. So and police procedurals, they're always there. There's always room for that, and I think it really explores people very up close.
Yeah. I'm curious with the the MFA from Sarah Lawrence. Is that a program you would recommend an aspiring writer attend? Because I always think about my audience, and so many of them are aspiring writers, and I'm just curious about what do you think the biggest takeaways you have from that experience in that program?
That's an interesting question, because I think MFAs have become a little bit controversial. People say, well, what do you get out of an MFA? And, they can be quite expensive. I think it's really what you're looking for as a writer. I enjoyed the experience. I'm not sure what I got out of it as a writer in terms of craft. I mean, I've always studied craft, and I've studied it afterwards. And I think a lot of MFA is short story writing, and it can be limited. So, having said that, I worked with great writers. It was really interesting to me, and I enjoyed the program. I don't regret the program. I think it would really be dependent on what a writer is looking for, and every MFA program is different. So it would really, I can only speak to Sarah Lawrence and what my experience. And I think Sarah Lawrence, when I was there, was a very traditional MFA program.
Yeah, there is the what do you want to get out of it, but there's also the what can you put into it, because it is what you put into it. That's a lot of what you're going to get out of it. So there's that as well. And there are people, I didn't go to school for writing. I didn't go to school for English. I went to school for psychology, and then I got an MBA. So when I started writing fiction, I really didn't know what I was doing. I made a lot of mistakes. A program like that would have been, I think, very helpful for me. I never pursued it, but I did think about it a few times. There's a school here in Connecticut, Fairfield University, that has a very well-known MFA program that's residency based, and it's one of those things I've been thinking about. But then it's when am I going to get the time off of work, and raising a young family and all that stuff. So it's
It is. I mean, people do fit it in, and I ended up doing it part-time because it was, it was just something that I didn't want, there was only so much time I could devote to it. But again, it's what you're putting into it, which is, I think, very key.
Right. So I'm curious, Melanie, if you were able to go back in time and whisper some words of advice to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self about writing and about what life is going to be like as a writer? I
think I would tell myself to not pay attention to everybody else and to pay attention to myself. I think that's what they tell runners. Don't look around. Just worry about your own pace. And I think, and I'm not a runner, but I've heard that, and I always thought you can apply that to anything in life. And I think I would be less concerned about how I should sound as a writer and what other people expect me to sound like. And I think, writing. My book came out when I was ready to have my own voice. And it took me a while to find my own voice, and a lot of that was writing things and then going back the next day and looking at it and thinking, this doesn't sound like anything I would ever say. And try not trying to sound like a writer, trying to sound like myself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I am a runner, so I know that, run your own race advice well, because that's who you're competing against. I mean, sure, you're competing against other people in the race you're running. I know that I'm never going to win a race. Like I just know I'm 50 years old. I'm not winning a race when you're running against, teenagers. But, I'm comparing myself to what I did in the last race and to see if I've improved. But it does take time to learn that. It also takes time to find your voice. And I think being a writer, writing a novel, you really have to think about it as running a marathon and not a sprint. It's not something that can be rushed. It is something that's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of practice. You train for a marathon typically over, 14 to 18, maybe 20 weeks. And it's going to take you a lot longer to write a book, but it's you've got to invest the time into it. You got to invest the time in your training, and your training as a writer it's doing the reps. It's doing it every day. It's taking the courses if that's the path you're on, and getting feedback from other people. And just continually learning. That's what I love about writing. It's you're always learning about yourself when you're writing.
I think that's right, and always trying to write a better book than your last one, which is a challenge when you just finished a book and you put everything into it, and then you think, and now I have to do that again, and I have to do it better this time, but as you said, you're competing against yourself, you're running your own race, so all of those things are true.
And interestingly, with book number two, and I don't know if you went the traditional route or a hybrid route or a self-published route, but on the traditional side of things, book number two usually comes with more expectations. Then, and I guess no matter how you publish, really that second book is going to be measured against the first one. But oftentimes that first one didn't necessarily have a deadline, but book number two sometimes does, and that's another bit of pressure that people face.
Yeah, I'm going to badly paraphrase Elvis Costello, because I think he said, when he wrote his first album, he had 20 years to write that, and then they want the second one in like 12 months. So, yeah, it's something like that. Definitely, the deadlines are different.
Oh, much different, much different. So, is there another book in you, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm actually finishing up book two, and with the main character Jamie Palmieri, and that's my current challenge.
Yes,
But the writing, the research. I mean, this to write a police procedural, and I think this is probably true for a lot of writers in other genres. It's just a tremendous amount of research.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a silly question I ask because I know that this is part of a trilogy, so there has to be, by definition,
yes,
a second and third book.
That's okay. That's okay. We could talk about where I am in my deadline, meeting my deadline, and I'm pretty much on pace.
Very good. And you got some exciting news from the New York Times recently, is that right?
I was very, very surprised. I was my Night Swimming was reviewed in the New York Times, and I was really very taken back by that and very grateful.
How important is that kind of validation for you as a writer?
There's one, there's to just say, wow, it's the New York Times. That's the standard. But it was really, I was trying to do something with my writing. I was trying to write a police procedural where I'd never done that before. And I was trying to do something deeper with it. And the review really validated what I was doing. And that just meant so much to me. And coming from, the woman who had, the author, Sarah Weinman, who I respect so much, just getting that validation from her, that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, it is
beyond just that it was the New York Times, but just really that something that I was trying to do, that I maybe hit the marks I was trying to, hit.
It's wind in the sails too, though. I mean, it is important to have those, those pats on the back and that recognition from, people who have done this before and who we admire. Because so often we don't, you write something and you may not get feedback on it for a while from somebody who's not your agent, not your editor, not your, not your partner. It can be a while before you're getting some feedback from some fresh voices. And when you get something positive, it feels good.
Absolutely. And, when you're writing a novel and you've read it so many times that you have, like, you're just, at that point, you have no objectivity at all on your own work because you're just proofing it and copy editing and you just can't, believe how many times you've read it and you don't even know what you're reading anymore. So that you really do need that feedback to say, you know what, this is, you produce something that people would want to take the time to read, because that's really what you're asking people, right? Spend time. You have only a limited amount of time during the week. Read my book, so that somebody would say, yeah, this is worthwhile.
Yeah. So, Melanie, I'm curious, where can people learn more about you? Do you have a website, or do you have some social media you might be active on?
I'm not that active on social media. I shouldn't admit that, but it's true. I do have a website, and I publish a Substack, which I write about 70s pop culture.
Very cool. I'll be sure to put a link to the book as well as a link to your Substack and website in our show notes so people can find you easily, Melanie. And I will say thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.